Last week I saw a post, but like I couldn't talk about it. I just wasn't really in the headspace to talk about this. It's about federal prisons and gender affirming care. Let me bring this up. This is this article from a week ago from the 19th. Federal prisons bar gender affirming care for trans people. People will die, an advocate warns, as standard treatments for gender dysphoria are replaced with therapy and antidepressants after Trump's order. So if you're in federal prisons, trans people will now no longer have access to gender affirming care, which is life-saving treatment, HRT and so on. And there's also like social conversion therapy going on with like staff being forced to misgender inmates, which, you know, like in a lot of instances, it's not really them being forced. That is something that already happens quite a lot. The federal prison will stop providing gender-affirming medical or social transition care to almost any transgender people under a new policy released by the Bureau of Prisons Thursday. Gender identity, the policy states, is disconnected from biological reality and sex and does not provide a meaningful basis for identification. The move opens 9 years of federal policy and will affect more than 1,000 people diagnosed with gender dysphoria in prisons across the country who had long-standing access to basic gender-affirming care. There was also like, you know, when it comes to like V-coding and so on, where inmates were forced to do oral sex and so on with prison guards in order to even get this basic form of gender-affirming care. Also, like, they wanted to push this like a year ago, right? This is June 3rd. Judge says Trump administration must provide hormone therapy accommodations to transgender inmates. That was a year ago in June, where they were already trying to push the biological reality in prisons, right? And a judge blocked that. What I also find interesting is that like RFK has been like pushing that like antidepressants are like evil, and you know, mental health treatments in general need to be banned because they are based on bad science. The same when it comes to like vaccines and so on, right? Like he's always been fighting against like antidepressants, and now inmates are forced to be medicated in such a way instead of having like gender dysphoria alleviated, right? Like gender affirming care doesn't fix, it doesn't remove gender dysphoria, it alleviates it, right? That's like the entire point of it. That's the entire point of like hormonal treatment and like the surgeries, etc. It's like to alleviate the distress. And if you have gender dysphoria, you have things like anxiety and depression and like suicidal thoughts, and they want to treat, they want to medicate you, they want to zombify you by giving you antidepressants. They want to like forcefully convert you by telling a trans woman that they are actually a man and that they are male and so on. The type of shit that like John Money wanted to like prove that you can turn a girl into a boy or a boy into a girl by like socially converting them and like abusing them and continuously telling them that they're actually, you know, the gender that matches their, you know, their genitalia and so on. Cruel, horrible thing that obviously doesn't work. This is like the cause for trans people to even have such a high suicide rate, but they're going to claim that this is going to be a success. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump is going to take this further and it's going to be like, well, if antidepressants don't do it, if you getting shocked doesn't do it, if you getting constantly misgendered and invalidated doesn't do it, well, maybe we should bring back lobotomies. And then they're going to roll this out for like anyone who is trans. And then they're going to celebrate that the numbers of people who, you know, self-identify as trans goes down. You know, like that is the success story. Putting people in a position where they're going to experience so much abuse that they hide who they are just to have like a little bit of peace. They are still suffering, but they are suffering inside. And that is the goal of like transphobia. That is the goal of like cruel practices like this. It is absolutely horrible. Conversion therapy doesn't work. It is abuse. Everything they are doing is just to uphold the capitalistic and patriarchal concept of like reproductive roles determine your place in society. You cannot break free from this system because the capitalists want you to uphold the reproductive apparatus. So anything that breaks this concept, that breaks the social construct gender and like thus gender roles, gender expectations, gender norms is bad for capitalism. And trans people, you know, we break this. We destroy the social construct gender because, you know, it is no longer the same as your biological sex, and your sex doesn't determine your gender identity. You know? So they try so hard to push these things in order to abuse trans people into hiding who they are. This goes on further when it comes to like V-coding, where trans women were put into men's facilities, into men's prisons, where they are pushed into cells with like aggressive men to calm them down. The amount of sexual assault that like even the guards have done onto like trans people is insane. And then you have like conservatives, you have like transphobes be like, haha, you should go to, you know, men's prison, and then you're going to be treated like a real woman. Ha 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 ha. Like, it's just the cruelty, right? But hormones and social accommodations were readily available after medical and psychological evaluation. Special clothing and commissary items were also available, like bras for transgender women or chest binders for transgender men. That began to change last year after Trump's executive order led to a chaotic response in federal prisons when transgender people had clothing and medications confiscated, only to be redistributed again while wardens awaited guidance from Washington. The new policy says no one newly diagnosed with gender dysphoria can have access to hormones, and anyone currently on hormones must taper off. Those who have already had surgery and those who have been on hormones for an extended period of time and develop severe withdrawal effects from tapering may have their tapering plan adjusted as necessary. So not even like if you've been on HRT and so on for such a long time that, for instance, you do not produce testosterone anymore, and like dropping estrogen causes the fact that your body doesn't have any hormones, thus you having essentially the same effects as someone who is menopausal, which is, you know, causing more depression, causing you to be physically weak, to be constantly exhausted, to be mentally drained, and so on. Like, not even those are able to keep taking estrogen. They're probably going to adjust it to be like, well, you know, you gotta raise your testosterone levels then. And you're going to see, like, more changes again, like a second surge of, like, a puberty that doesn't align with your gender identity, thus causing you even more distress. And then people don't care about you because you went to prison, you did the bad thing, haha. The new federal prison policy says that each person with gender dysphoria will get an individualized treatment plan, but there's categorical ban on surgery and new hormone prescription. Yeah, so they're just going to quote-unquote medicate it away. They're just going to make you numb to it. They're just going to zombify you instead. Experts caution that for many people, therapy alone is not adequate. Dan Karasik, a psychiatrist at the University of California, San Francisco, helped develop international standards for the treatment of transgender people and is an expert witness for prisoners in the ongoing lawsuit challenging the Bureau of Prisons implementation of Trump's executive order. For those people for whom hormones and surgery are indicated, psychotherapy is not a substitute. Psychotherapy does not make gender dysphoria go away. You are substituting an intervention that's been demonstrated to be affected with one that has not, Karasik said, which is true. If you have gender dysphoria and this causes you to have social anxiety or depression, taking antidepressants does not fix the root cause of said depression. If you struggle getting out of bed every single time, if you struggle looking into the mirror, if you struggle, you know, being around people because you're constantly invalidated and have people insist that you're someone that you're not, taking medication that makes you like a little bit number to it or gives you like a little bit more energy, it gives you a little bit more dopamine, does not fix the fact that your environment is causing you to be depressed and suicidal. Some of the language in the new policy is nearly identical to a 2024 Florida policy that experts liken to conversion therapy, a discredited practice that claims to cure homosexuality. Under Florida's policy, the state's prisons eliminated access to women's clothing and undergarments, stopped providing accommodations that allowed trans women to grow their hair long, and greatly restricted access to gender-affirming hormones. First, they made her cut her hair, then they took her bra away, said Latricia Ramon, whose daughter Sarge Smith was incarcerated in Florida. Smith had a well-developed breasts after years on hormones. In the prison uniform was a thin white t-shirt, which left her feeling exposed and unsafe. Imagine walking around a men's prison without a bra. Imagine walking around men's prison as a woman. Like, it's just cruel. And it's like the social conversion therapy of like, well, we are not shocking you, but we are forcing you to adhere to societal standards that match your biological sex, which is just transphobia. Smith died by suicide in a Florida prison last year. Friends and family blame the prison for suddenly stopping her gender-affirming care. You will see a lot of that. And then people don't care because it's prisons, because it's inmates. The Trump administration is testing conversion therapy by medically experimenting on trans people in prisons. The Bureau of Prisons is subjecting trans people to conversion therapy and denying them care, with the goal of helping them quote-unquote recover. It's trying to prove dangerous conversion practices can work. That is the goal. Because they are testing it on inmates in prison. They're going to claim that it's a success and that they made a recovery, and then they're going to use this as a precedent in order to push the idea that anyone who is trans, anyone who is diagnosed with gender dysphoria can benefit from cruel conversion therapy. Your environment, the school, needs to insist that no, actually this trans girl is just a boy. They need to be forced into sports with other boys. They need to be included with the other boys, which is going to cause suicide rates to go up. And they will still claim that it's a success. And then you will see that the US is going to be used as an example in other countries that push transphobia as a tool in order to get more people radicalized and invested in the far-right politics. UK, Reform UK, they already wanted to push like conversion therapy. They're going to use the success of the US as like a tool in order to push the idea that in the UK, gender-affirming care needs to be outright banned. That is something that like Labour is also doing, right? Like all of these LGB Alliance and so on who are like, well, you know, like actually now that the UK Supreme Court said that trans women will never be women, actually gender-affirming care and puberty blockers need to be removed, and actually, right, like you just need to like live with that. Germany, the AfD, like I can already see that like, especially in Bavaria and so on, like they're going to push this as well. They're going to push this conversion therapy, make everyone, you know, a zombie, make them the same. I don't want to go back. I don't want to have to go back into the closet. I don't want to, you know, like a detransition, be forcefully detransitioned, because I know what my life was like before all of this. I know that I struggled every single day with wanting to kill myself. I know what it's like, how hard it was to even, you know, have the strength to start transitioning, to go through this process, to go on this journey, despite the constant pushback, despite all of the hatred, to force myself to go through the process, the steps required for me to start transitioning, because it was my last hope. There wasn't anything else. I tried therapy. I tried to just, you know, man up. I know what it's like growing up as a kid with gender dysphoria, to not fit in, to not have like a place because of your gender identity not matching your sex, to look into the mirror and perceive yourself in a way that doesn't connect with you inside of your brain. I know how it is to go through the steps of like overperforming masculinity, because like you just need to like, you know, man up, be a real man. You just gotta like deal with all of these things. I know what it's like to be numb, and I also know what it's like to start transitioning, to go through all of this, to get to a point where you're happier and to actually feel like you're living your life, that you're able to make memories as yourself. I know what it's like to have finally a moment where you have hope, and then people in positions of power use your existence as like a political tool in order to take everyone's rights away and turn everything into like some authoritarian surveillance state that is like controlled through AI. Rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But hey, at least trans people are killing themselves. So I just hope that this is going to be a wake-up call for a lot of people, instead of like having someone like Gavin Newsom be like, oh well, you know, we went a little bit too far with the woke, the pronouns, we went a little bit too far with that. We need more people, more politicians to actually speak up, because otherwise more trans people are going to die, and that is absolutely horrible. That is terrifying. That is scary. Conversion therapy doesn't work. It doesn't work for gay people. It doesn't work for trans people. A trans girl is a girl, and it doesn't matter how hard you try to push the idea that no, actually it's a boy. It's just not true. It is not reality. And anyone who is pushing this is abusive. Anyways, that was the depressing topic for today. It is incredibly painful. But I think that these things need to be talked about. Because, you know, if trans people don't speak up, we can't rely on cis people. We can't rely on politicians. Sadly, we're kind of on our own here.